This game should have been Game of the Year. Like, don't get me wrong, I love God of War, it was fantastic, I loved every second of it, and up until Red Dead 2 came out, it was my favourite game of all time. But ever since playing Red Dead 1, I've become attached to these characters and this story. It just has that edge for me, it really does. And yes, I'm aware, I'm wearing a fucking beanie, you know, get all your roast at in the comments section. I'm wearing it because my hair's a bit of a fucking mess right now, I'm wearing it like a bit of a fucking nonce, but let's be honest, it's not that bad, is it? Just, I'm my clothing, you know? Please don't roast me too hard in the comments section, please. Red Dead Redemption 2 is arguably one of the best games ever made, and honestly, there's so many twists and turns in the game. It plays with your emotions in a way. It changes the way you see certain characters and the way you perceive certain actions that you commit as a player. Rockstar have always been good at characters, but I genuinely feel as if Rockstar have outdone themselves this time. Red Dead 2 is full of some of the most amazing characters I've ever had the pleasure of sharing an experience with, and from the moment I booted this game up, I knew it was going to be one of those games that change your outlook of the whole landscape of the video game industry as a whole, from like a standpoint of storytelling, character progression, realism, gameplay, you know, that sort of thing. This game has it all, and I truly believed it was robbed of Game of the Year. Like, I'm not saying that God of War was undeserving, because it's a great game. My second favourite game of all time. By far, it's fantastic, it's an amazing experience, great cinematics, amazing acting, amazing gameplay, progression, storytelling, but I still think that Red Dead Redemption 2 should have got Game of the Year. And in this video, I'm going to try and explain sort of why. Red Dead Redemption 2 is the game that everyone's been pretty much waiting for ages, and I know by this point it has been out for a long time. I'm probably very late to the party, but like, honestly, when am I not late to the party, let's be honest. To be quite honest, it's one of those games where you can't believe you're actually playing it. I mean, it's almost been 8 years since the original Red Dead came out, and I remember absolutely loving that when it came out, even though I was about 9 years old. So playing the sequel and being able to appreciate all of the intricacies of how it sets up the original game perfectly, it was absolutely surreal, to be honest. It's one of those games that makes you feel empty when you finish that final mission and have no story left to see. And I remember I had the exact same feeling when I finished the first game all those years ago. This is a good thing to clarify. This means that the game had an emotional effect on me, so much so that I became attached to these characters and storylines that are completely and utterly fictional. Arthur Morgan as a character is one of the most well-written video game characters that Rockstar have ever produced, possibly even one of the most well-written characters of all time. His character and the attachment that the player develops to his character all relies on the relatability of his character. We're not playing as a notorious outlaw, we're not playing as a legendary gunslinger, and we're not playing as a family man with a dark past. We're playing as a dude who spent most of his life being a complete asshole to everyone as long as there was money involved. A man who blindly followed a greedy tyrant and someone who valued loyalty more than anything else. Arthur Morgan is a superbly written, complex character with an incredible arc. People always say, why is it called Red Dead Redemption 2 when the whole reason why Red Dead Redemption 1 was called Redemption is because it was the story of John Marston and how he was redeeming his former self. Well, Red Dead Redemption 2 is almost Arthur atoning for his bad deeds in life too, and allowing John to redeem himself in the first place. After being diagnosed with tuberculosis, he becomes very philosophical and starts to realise that his life was wasted on violence and a way of living that is no longer possible. So he begins to try and do something worthwhile before his death, which is giving John, Abigail and Jack a chance at a normal life. It's such a nice sentiment. Arthur fought hard for someone who was like a brother to him, John, and everything that Arthur fought for in the end became into fruition. His life of thieving, killing, and running wasn't for nothing because John got the happy ending in this game that Arthur wanted him to. Red Dead Redemption 2 is such a touching and superb story, but it really does have that tone of isolation and hopelessness, because at the end of the day, the story of Red Dead Redemption is a tragedy. In my opinion, the story of this game is way more personal and relatable than God of War. Don't get me wrong, they're both amazing games, with amazing narratives, with superb writers behind them, but Red Dead 2's story definitely trumps God of War's story in my opinion. I became way more attached to the characters, even the characters that you know as enemies in Red Dead 1 like Bill, Escuela, Dutch. However, as the game progresses, you see how their characters do sort of start to shift to their Red Dead Redemption 1 counterparts. It's done so subtly and so well, it's almost like their personalities are changing as normally as a person in real life would. Dutch's has to be the best by far though. His character is almost the polar opposite of Arthur's in the end of the game, even though they were very similar men at the beginning. Considering how close he is to Arthur as a character, I mean, he refers to Arthur as like a son to him many times throughout the game. So it's heartbreaking to see Dutch turn from this clear-headed man with a plan and a set of morals including loyalty, trust, family, and never killing people who don't deserve it, among other things. You see him turn into this man who is only out for money and only out for himself, and he really does become the conniving Dutch from the first game. You see his morals slowly become less and less important to him as every big plan fails one after the other. In the end, he leaves John to die, all for the sake of money. Not only does Dutch go through big changes throughout the game, but so does Arthur. In the beginning of the game, Arthur really seems to look up to Dutch and admires him. He's pretty much Dutch's second-hand man. He almost seems like a sort of henchman for Dutch in a way, with doing whatever Dutch says without question at all. And that's sort of what Rockstar wanted. They wanted Arthur to look like this bandit, this outlaw who will do anything for the leader of the gang at the beginning of the game, because the gang really did have such a tight bond. Arthur puts his life on the line for him and would support him above all else. But as Dutch starts wavering and descends into greed, Arthur's view of Dutch and therefore the world completely shifts. Dutch was pretty much Arthur's world throughout his life. He took him in, ran the gang with him. He was Dutch's second-hand man, as I've said. When Dutch was no longer as mentally strong as he used to be, Arthur's belief in Dutch wasn't as strong either. So not only does Arthur question Dutch as a person, but he also questions the way he lived his life, the only world he's ever known, a world of thieving and taking what he wants whenever he wants it, blindly following a man he believed to be honest and true. And all of this comes to a spearhead when he finally decides to help John get out of the life of crime, because he realised that his life was a waste, and he was running out of time and needed to atone for the things that he'd done, and he couldn't bear to see John make the same mistake as he did. It's such a touching sentiment. The sort of feud between Dutch and Arthur's clashing personalities is also such a small part of the story. The game is a true Wild West gang story of chasing riches in a world that no longer tolerates outlaws and bandits. It's a story about a family and the importance of community. It's a story about the struggle of the Native Americans in the 20th century America. However, I think that even within this whole story, with so many different themes, so many different characters, and so many different branching narratives, I love how it's just the tale of a man who is running out of time to make amends for the things he has done in his life. And the end to Arthur's story is amazing. After everything you go through during the game, everything you've done, it ends with 3 remaining people: Arthur, Micah, and Dutch. Arthur knows he's won. John got out, and in Arthur's last moments, as far as he's concerned, John will live out the rest of his days with his family. So he's happy in his last moments. He crawls up to a good high perch on the hill and faces the sunrise. Which brings to mind a specific quote from earlier on in the game where Hosea asks Arthur how he wants to die.
With friends or with family? I don't think it matters more than that.
What about you, Arthur?
Me? I don't care about that nonsense.
Come on.
Face me to the west so I can watch the setting sun and remember all the fine times we had that way.
See, Tilly? I told you Arthur had a soul.
However, in the ending of the game, Arthur is facing east and he's actually watching the sun rise. And whereas you could kind of think that Arthur didn't actually get his perfect death, in a way it kind of symbolises how Arthur was looking to the future and looking to John, opposed to looking back on everything that he's done in his troubled life. So it makes the ending of the game even more touching. Anyway, the ending to Arthur's story was beautifully executed, beautifully performed, and beautifully written. I couldn't have asked for better closure for his character. There are so many amazing moments and it's so hard to cover them all, but if I were to pick my favourite moment in the entire game, it's got to be the very ending shootout on top of the mountain in the epilogue. At this point you're already playing as John, which I can say was another amazing moment. I swear to God, when the epilogue started, and it allowed me to play as John 8 years after the ending of the main game. I sat there with the most stupid smile on my face in the entire fucking world. I don't remember the last time a video game has made me just sit there in complete shock before. Anyways, the last gunfight of the whole game is my favourite moment for one reason. The original Red Dead 1 shootout music starts playing. The whole time playing as Arthur, the game was missing that classic Red Dead music during gunfights. Don't get me wrong, the music in this game is absolutely beautiful throughout. It's one of the most amazing soundtracks I've ever heard in a game. Really, you should go and listen to the Red Dead 2 soundtrack. It is amazingly composed. However, this specific piece of music from Red Dead 1 did leave a massive hole in the game's soundtrack for me. But oh boy was I proven wrong. You fight New York the Mountain with Sadie and Charles, both of them get incapacitated and you have to do it by yourself. And then that specific piece of music starts playing. In Red Dead 2, this piece of music is called Jim Milton Rides Again, which is pretty funny because that's what John calls himself in the epilogue of the game, because he still has a bounty on his head. However, it's such a great name for the track because it has been 8 years since John was properly riding and shooting like he used to, and it completes the feeling of Red Dead by the end of the game. Honestly, in that last mission of the game, it no longer feels like Red Dead 2. It just feels like Red Dead 1. The whole epilogue, in fact, was a huge fan service, and it just made me fall in love with the game even more. Like, it was fantastic enough as it was. Solid open world, story, plenty of shit to do, and amazing characters. However, the epilogue just went that bit further. They created New Austin and allowed you to play as John Marston, and even let him have his own short story after the end of the main game. Rockstar went the extra mile in this game. Not only to bring us an experience that would blow any other game out of the water, but also to make the fans happy with an experience that was able to emotionally affect us. This game's story and characters really was absolutely beautiful, and an experience that I wish I could have again, completely fresh. Rockstar stressed that they wanted to break boundaries in terms of the open world and how the player interacts with that world in Red Dead 2, and oh my did they succeed. Never have I played in an open world that felt quite as living and breathing as Red Dead Redemption 2's open world, and Rockstar aimed for a very realistic simulation-like open world of America in the late 19th century, and they nailed it. They absolutely fucking nailed it. All the way from the dark, impoverished streets of Saint Denis, all the way to the open wild fields of New Hanover. This is one of those games that astonishes you with its levels of realism. The horses look beautiful, your clothes get bloody after taking damage, your beard grows at a believable rate, most items you interact with have realistic animations to go with it, people react to being shot how you'd expect them to, your horse can die, you can wear warm clothes to protect yourself from the cold, you can form a natural bond with your horse which will increase and your horse's levels of trust of companionship, the list goes on. The thing is, this type of realism has already been attempted by so many games before. Games like Kingdom Come Deliverance that boasted realism as a main selling point. However, I think Rockstar hit the sweet spot. Opposed to marketing a game as a realistic survival-esque game, they made the realism simply another gameplay feature, and it was borderline realism. The game was realistic enough that it was a nice addition to the game, but it wasn't the sole purpose of the open world experience, if that makes any sense. The realism wasn't debilitating and didn't hold the experience back at all like it did sometimes in Kingdom Come Deliverance. Having such a packed sandbox to play around in on top of the realistic setting made for one of the most significant open world experiences I've ever had in any game. Everywhere in the open world is beautiful. It really leaves me in awe how utterly breathtaking some of the areas in this game look. This only means that exploring and side questing is even more fun because you get to fully envelop yourself in this stunning recreation of turn of the century America. Rockstar's philosophy with Red Dead 2 is that they want an open world that is relatively small but densely packed with content, which only made the whole game feel that bit more polished. Everywhere you went there were things to do like hunting, fishing, bounties, debt collecting, home robberies, character side quests, and of course stranger missions that we all know and love from Rockstar titles. All of this content is obviously obviously excluding the main story, as well as various minigames and extra activities like blackjack, poker, dominoes, five-finger fillet, arm wrestling, cattle, herding, drinking, going to the cinema, or watching a show. There is so much to do in Red Dead Redemption 2, but the level of content isn't overwhelming, and there's plenty downtime to be able to get stuck in and really enjoy some of the side content in the game's open world. I personally really enjoyed the debt collecting missions as Arthur, because in the end, if you have high enough honor, he realizes it's a cruel practice and actually throws Strauss out of the gang. However, I much more enjoyed the bounty hunting when playing as John. I suppose it's because bounty hunting is an integral part to his character, but it just felt better to be bounty hunting as John opposed to Arthur. One activity that I couldn't hack at all though was the hunting. I get the need for realism, at least it's consistent with the rest of the game, however it's just too slow for my liking. Plus the animals weren't even in the right spawning areas where they were supposed to be on the map, and it started to become a chore to find them, and ended up boring me a lot. However, that's just my personal experience of hunting in the game. Also, I didn't enjoy the tiers of skin that animals could have. I spent literally hours trying to find a 3-star coyote. It really should depend on the quality of the kill and the right weapon you use, opposed to the actual level of the skin of the animal itself. It's kind of a stupid feature. Anyway, that's just my personal experience of hunting in the game. Maybe I didn't have time to stick to it or something, but I just didn't really enjoy it personally. All the other content in the game is fantastic though, to be honest. If you enjoy customization and being able to kit yourself out with the rarest outfits and weapons, then Red Dead Redemption 2 certainly won't disappoint you on this front. I dabbled a bit in the crafting of this game, but only slightly because I was so encapsulated in the main story, and because my external hard drive only has 1 terabyte of storage and I was already running out by that point, so I couldn't really delve into the hunting because it was a long fucking process. I did a bit of hunting, crafted some jackets and some weapon holsters, but I didn't really get into it. There is a nice amount of character customization, however. You can change your clothes, weapons, hairstyle, hair length, beard style, beard length, horse and horse accessories. It's just the right amount of customization that doesn't take too much of your game time, but it's enough to make a significant increase in the levels of progression in the game. Plus, it's noticeable progression, especially when you purchase a new gun or horse. As always, Rockstar have delivered a fantastic level of depth when they didn't even need to. They went that extra mile, included different horse breeds, coats, class types. They included weapon improvements, attachments and engravings. On top of this, there are so many different shops you can enter to buy the items you want, such as various pre-made outfits, items of clothing and their colour, guns and their attachments, as well as consumables such as food, drink or cigarettes. I honestly couldn't have asked for more, and I really have no issue with this segment of the game. They certainly did right by us who enjoy progression and customization. To conclude, I absolutely love this game. As soon as I finished it, it made its way directly to the top of my list of favourite games. If there's any game worthy of being my current #1 game, then it's definitely this. To this day, I can't see why God of War got Game of the Year over this. This game was too perfect, too polished, and too groundbreaking not to have won. Now, I'm not saying God of War is undeserving of Game of the Year, and I'm not saying that God of War wasn't polished and groundbreaking, but I'm just saying that I don't think it deserves the title as much as Red Dead 2 does, but hey, that's just me. This game has it all. Story, characters, beautiful open world, realism, graphics, smooth gameplay, an amazing soundtrack, a truly talented cast, but most of all, one of the best development teams of all time. Every studio under Rockstar's umbrella, which consists of over 2,000 people. So on behalf of everyone that enjoyed Red Dead Redemption 2, I want to say thank you to Rockstar for giving us a piece of media that we will all remember for the rest of our lives.